Hare Krishna, Bhagavad Purman Supariprajaka Sto Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Miraj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Nama Acharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Shriva Shadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath, Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navdeep Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Haribol.
Welcome everyone to Srimad Bhagavatam with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. It is Wednesday, June 4th, and today we're starting with Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 16, Text 8.
Well, I've been starting lately, so I guess I'll start. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Deve Varshat Yaso Devo Nadadeva Vapur Harihi Krishtra Prana Prajahyesha Rakshish Yat Anjasendravat. When there is no rainfall and the citizens are in great danger due to the scarcity of water, this royal personality of Godhead, King Prithu, will be able to supply rains exactly like the heavenly king Indra. Thus, he will very easily be able to protect the citizens from drought. Purport. King Prithu is very appropriately compared to the sun and the demigod Indra. King Indra of the heavenly planets is in charge of distributing water over the earth and other planetary systems. It is indicated that King Prithu would arrange for the distribution of rainfall personally if Indra failed to discharge his duty properly. Sometimes the king of heaven, Indra, would become angry at the inhabitants of the earth if they did not offer sacrifices to appease him. King Prithu, however, being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, did not depend on the mercy of the heavenly king. It is foretold herein that if there would be a scarcity of rain, King Prithu would manage to counteract the deficiency by virtue of his godly powers. Such powers were also exhibited by Lord Krishna when he was present in Vrindavan. Indeed, when Indra poured incessant water on Vrindavan for 7 days, the inhabitants were protected by Krishna, who raised Govardhan Hill over their heads as a great umbrella. Thus, Lord Krishna is also known as Govardhan Dhari. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Tadhati Shapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Padishana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lolita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha. Somewhere also there. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vansha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. You can spread the drinks all around.
Okay,
I got
it's a little trickier on the carpet because they tip over.
Yeah. Okay. Well, varsity, rainfall. In previous verses, King Prithu has been compared to the sun because the sun distributes, it dries up water and distributes water. He's been compared to the earth because the earth is tolerant and maintains everyone. And now he's compared to Indra. And not only compared, but it's said that if Indra fails, Prithu will do the needful. No need to worry about Indra, because Prithu is the empowered incarnation of Krishna. He can provide the rains if necessary. Krishna prana, for the suffering living entities. When there's no rain, then all the living beings are put into difficulty. That was the argument. Rain is essential, so we have to do this Govardhan, this Indra Puja. And Krishna argued, no, Indra has to pour rain everywhere anyway, it's his duty. And that's, of course, a whole episode. But here, the duty of the king is to protect the citizens. And King Prithu would be able to do that to such an extent that even if the rain were to cease or be withheld, he would be able to supply. Any comments, questions? Yes.
I'm just reminded of the verse Sarvadeva Mayo Guru.
Sarvadeva Mayo Guru. Yeah. In which way?
That the Vaishnava is the representative of all the demigods and as glorious as all the demigods.
The spiritual master is the representative of all the demigods, yes.
So here Prithu is just taking it sort of to another. Prithu Maharaj is taking it sort of.
Takes it to another
multiple
level. Yeah, the spiritual master may not be able to provide rain in its absence or other such facilities. But he's the representative of Krishna who encompasses all the demigods. Something else? Okay.
Well, I did actually think of, because you mentioned the other day that, Kali Yuga doesn't have kings like that. Instead, we have heads of state that will withhold what's it called? You know, if there's a drought or a forest fire, oh no, you didn't vote for me, so I'm not gonna send any help your way. It's like so opposite.
There, what can be done? What can be done? Or even not a question of withholding, we don't have any, it's all been spent, sorry. Or they drive the state deeper into debt, they borrow money, more money, and increase the wealth of the bank, or the debtors, the creditors, whoever they may be. Hmm?
There are so many shining examples of leadership, and there are so many shining examples of good leadership in Srimad Bhagavatam as well as bad. Things like it would be, it seems a far off possibility, but if today's modern leaders were to take these instructions and examples, maybe we'd have better outcomes.
Sure, people were to model themselves on these kings, ideal kings, we would expect a different outcome. They need to be trained, otherwise they just pick up the Prithu profile, but not provide the Prithu benefits or the Prithu discretion and so on. Just, cut a profile, King Prithu, and not do it. So it needs training. It needs training. Training in culture and power. Otherwise, everyone would like to have the power. But who's willing to learn the culture and accept the training?
We have something.
Yeah.
Praveen Prabhu writes, Lord Rishabhadev had also brought rainfall when Indra tried to withhold the rain.
Hmm. Thank you.
Rishabdev.
Hmm?
Indra tried to withhold when Rishabdev brought rain?
With Rishabdev. I've forgotten the incident, I think. But that's what it says. That's what Praveen says, and he's usually pretty good on these things. Okay. Apyayatyaso lokam vadanamritamurtina sanuragavalokena vishada smita charuna. King Prithu Maharaj, by virtue of his affectionate glances and beautiful moon-like face, always smiling with great affection for the citizens, will enhance everyone's peaceful life. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that he holds the body of the moon within himself. So the moon is cooling, and the moon-like face is a common metaphor. So that's the nature of such a king, that he's benevolent and he's wise. And in Ecclesiastes it said, wisdom makes a man's face shine. So he has a beautiful shining face with affectionate glances, smiling out of affection for the citizens. Who would not want to be led by such a king? Avyakta Varmaisha Niguta Karyo Gambhira Vedha Upagupta Vitta Ananta Mahatmya Gunaika Thama pratu pracheta ivasam vatatma. The reciters continued, no one will be able to understand the policies the king will follow. His activities will also be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he will make every activity successful. His treasury will always remain unknown to everyone. He will be the reservoir of unlimited glories and good qualities, and his position will be maintained and covered, just as Varuna, the deity of the seas, is covered all around by water. Purport. There is a predominating deity for all the material elements, and Varuna, or Pracheta, is the predominating deity of the seas and the oceans. From outward appearances, the seas and oceans are devoid of life. But a person acquainted with the sea knows that within the water exist many varieties of life. The king of that underwater kingdom is Varuna. Just as no one can understand what is going on beneath the sea, no one could understand what policy King Prithu was following to make everything successful. Indeed, King Prithu's path of diplomacy was very grave. His success was made possible because he was a reservoir of unlimited glorified qualities. This doesn't mean that it was bewildering what the laws were, or what the policies of the state were, but Vartma means his path. Avyakta Vartma, it was, you wouldn't know, especially in policy in regard to diplomacy, you never quite know what the head of state has in mind, because he's doing something which, if disclosed, would get messed up. Just in military strategy, you don't just lay it all out on the table. Well, we're going to send some troops here to divert the enemy, and then that has to be secret.
Right.
So there are other things in regard to running the state that you don't disclose. You just do it so expertly that everyone's satisfied. So Avyakta Vartma, Niguta Karyo, his activities will also be confidential. And let's see, his diplomacy, very grave. Anyway, I could give examples, but that's the idea, that he doesn't let on. He waits for it to be successful.
It actually, hearing this reminded me, long time back, Swarg and I were doing we had the Adopt-A-Cow program in Devanagari, and I remember Ravinder Swarupu coming and talking to us, and there was something he was saying about, if there's going to be a meeting, what you do is you go and you talk to each of the individual participants before the meeting, so that you know, when you get there, you kind of know how everybody, they're already on your side. I mean, we can do that, but it just reminded me of King Prithu's.
Yeah, diplomacy. Diplomacy involves these sort of things. Being well informed about everyone, but being a little bit, what's the word? Inscrutable.
Holding your cards.
Holding your cards close to your chest. No one quite knows where you stand, what you're going to do. Particularly any enemies of the state don't know. But even no one may quite know. Yes.
Yeah, that's in a stark contrast with someone who can't control his speech at all.
Yeah.
Going on
they
and
blab.
on every day, every hour, in the middle of the night, whenever he gets in front of Twitter. Anyway, the idea being there is a difference between someone whose senses are controlled and who's a very deep personality, and someone
Yeah.
who cannot come even close to controlling. his-
Grave. Part of grave means you can't tell what he's thinking. That's Rupa Goswami describes that. Brahma, after offering prayers to Krishna, couldn't tell what Krishna thought about it. Because Krishna was so grave. Is he pleased? Is he displeased? Krishna was so grave that even Brahma couldn't understand. The word upagupta, vitta, is very significant in this verse. It indicates that no one would know the extent of the riches King Prithu would confidentially keep. The idea is that not only the king, but everyone should keep his hard-earned money confidentially and secretly, so that in due course of time, the money can be spent for good, practical purposes. In Kali Yuga, however, the king or government has no well-protected treasury, and the only means of circulation is currency notes made of paper. Thus, in times of distress, the government artificially inflates the currency by simply printing papers, and this artificially raises the price of commodities, and the general condition of the citizens becomes very precarious. Thus, keeping one's money very secretly is an old practice, for we find this practice present even during the reign of Maharaj Prithu. Just as the king has the right to keep his treasury confidential and secret, the people also should keep their individual earnings a secret. There's no fault in such dealings. The main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of varnashram dharma, so that the money is spent only for good causes and nothing else.
Another question on that, because somewhere, isn't it that the definition of a Brahmana is given that he's so truthful that he will disclose the whole truth even to an enemy?
Yeah, Brahmins are truthful. They're straightforward. But a Kshatriya shouldn't be too straightforward. He has to be a little cagey. He has to be shrewd. Brahmin doesn't have to be shrewd like that.
Nor does a Brahmana have a big
Yes,
stock.
A big treasury, yeah.
Right.
that's what I was going to comment.
Yes, Panchatattva.
And I'm
Yeah.
beating you to it.
The-
No, it's perfect.
My thought is, I think about how this applies to nonprofit organizations and so on. There it seems, well, the standard moral practice is to be transparent. A nonprofit organization that keeps its treasury secret is likely to be a poorly supported nonprofit organization because the donors rightly consider themselves stakeholders in the enterprise. And so if the enterprise is hiding its money and you can't tell what it's being used for and so on, then where is the confidence for donating? So it seems that a nonprofit organization at least should be upfront. And that's a standard expectation of any decent charity or nonprofit organization, that it should disclose to its supporters its finances and persuade the supporters by proper dealings, that their money is being carefully shepherded, that it's being carefully used, that the purposes are being carefully thought out, that if I gave money for one purpose, it's meant for that purpose, and so on. My personal practice, you may know, is that I disclose what's in my treasury. I'm not a king. And in one sense, not even, I'm not earning any money by working. I have no personal kind of assets that I ought to be hiding. Sannyasi is not really supposed to have any assets financially. He shouldn't be holding money. The brahmacharis, the sannyasis, and the vanaprasthas not supposed to be holding on to money. So if we are holding on to money, in my view, it's somebody else's money. It's the church will claim it as its money. ISKCON will claim its money. It may not be ISKCON's. Some of it may belong to another organization. But I would expect that a sannyasi would, or at least I don't want to expect things from sannyasi. My practice is that be open and here, this is what it is. No need to be secretive about how much of your money I have, or how much of the church's money I'm holding on to. When the sannyasis become like kings and then most of the money is in their hands, then running the organization becomes somewhat dicey. And those who are holding the money put themselves in the path of possible difficulty, because money causes difficulty. There may be other views and people who look at it different ways, but that's how I choose to deal with it.
Isn't that how Maharaj Pariksit responded to Kali when he said, give me some place?
Where money is hoarded.
Right.
Of course, the case can be made that a sannyasi who's a manager or who's involved with many projects may keep the money confidentially so that it won't be plundered by needless claimants or governing bodies or what have you, and it can be used for worthy purposes. But then things do become more complicated when you approach it that way. But I don't want to judge what others do. At least that's what I do. I figure really it's public money, so the public should be informed of what's being done with it. So far, I haven't had difficulties with that.
Of course, we don't live in a monarchy. We live in a system which is rife with potential, either corruption or potential for corruption.
Excuse me?
It's a system that we live in which is, at least currently, rife with either corruption or potential for corruption. Could an argument be made under the current situation that some transparency, some reporting by the government on how it's using funds and how much funds it has is due to the citizens so that they can feel...
The state government?
Yeah.
Sure. It's supposed to be, well, in democracy, the voters are, in theory, what would you say, participants in the government. So then accounting should be given to them. Monarchy doesn't have to be. In a good money, no one's quarreling. Oh, Prithu, you're not telling us where the money is. They don't have, because they're satisfied. We're getting all the benefits. We're protected. Our king is like our father. So there's no envy. There's no suspicion. There's no anxiety. The king, all right, he's holding on to the money. We trust him. He's the way we trust our father. But now the governments can't be trusted with anything. So, a different story. There's some comments.
Yes, Praveen Prabhu writes, in quotations, not able to follow the policies of the king, activities confidential, treasury unknown. These seem qualities not only of Prithu, but also other capable rulers.
Yeah. Yeah, these qualities may be seen to some extent in other rulers. Why not? But they're present to an extraordinary extent in King Prithu. All right, there's another
Yes. Praveen Prabhu writes, Indra, the king of heaven, who is very materially opulent, became envious of Rishabdev. Consequently, he stopped pouring water on the planet known as Varsha. At that time, the Supreme Lord Rishabdev, the master of all mystic power, understood King Indra's purpose and smiled a little. Then, by his own prowess, through Yogamaya, his internal potency, he profusely poured water upon his own place, which was known as Janaba.
There you go. Yes.
I found it interesting, kind of curious, that, was it 2 days ago or 3 days ago, you were reading about how in Kali Yuga, people are taxed so unfairly and heavily that people will hide away their money. So obviously the two situations are not the same. There's differences between them, but they're close enough that I found it kind of interesting that the two situations are similar but different.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody becomes diplomatic in dealing with the state because the state is so rapacious. It wants so much. Prabhupada also talks about how we heard how King Prithu deals with citizens in distress. And now we hear how the modern governments deal with it. They just print more money.
Yeah.
I saw the term used, quantitative easing.
Yeah.
I assume that means what it
Money printing.
says it means. We just print more. Quantitative easing. We have, X number of currency notes, but it's not enough. And so we're going to increase the quantity by printing more. Quantitative easing, it really sounds good. What could be more benevolent than quantitative? But it really means that we have no more assets than we had yesterday, but now we have more money because we're just going to the print shop and printing more of it. So, and then of course you're prostituting the currency. The price of goods go up because the same $50 now doesn't buy what it bought yesterday because it's worth less because there's more paper to go around. So that's called fiat currency also. It doesn't have, paper doesn't have real monetary value, but I declare it to have value. Fiat currency. Even these, when I was young, on the bills it said that you could take this bill and exchange it for a silver dollar, right? Remember that? You were entitled to take this bill and demand. In fact, I think it said that, on demand. You could have your silver dollar in exchange for your note. Today it just says that it's legal tender for all purposes. you can't exchange it. There's no guarantee that you can exchange it for anything. And at some point, it can just go down the drain. Your currency becomes unsupportable, and it's all over.
Except they looked up the value of a silver dollar because someone gave one as a donation. And just for a regular silver dollar, no particular special year, the silver content is worth a minimum of $27.
Hmm.
And if it's, certain mint year can go up to
Hmm.
500, 9,000, 900.
So if you'd held onto those silver dollars, or you had one, now you'd have 27. And I don't want to get into all the ins and outs. I'm not really good on understanding economics, but I can understand this point that Prabhupada makes, that when you're just printing more money as a response to your needs, then you are playing games with the economy in such a way that you're prostituting the currency. Yes.
They say that if there's like an economic downturn and things are getting bad,
Mm-hmm.
first central bank lowers interest rates to try to stimulate economic activity, and if that doesn't work, the Federal Reserve buys securities, primarily U.S. Treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, on the open market with money created out of thin air.
Oh, Krishna.
This is sometimes referred to as money printing. Of course, the Fed isn't running off $100 bills in the basement of the Eccles building. It's more like using a debit card when no money is in the account.
Hmm.
And it goes on to explain.
Yeah, it can sort of, it's obviously not a neutral account, but that does go on, and I don't profess to understand all the ins and outs of, and we won't get into Federal Reserve kata.
Sure.
We could, but I think that would take us a bit far afield.
I actually remember a Back to Godhead article from some years back where the person posed a question, would you become, simply for economic reasons, would you become richer if you could have unlimited quantities of gold or unlimited quantities of cow dung? And during the article, they managed to present a very convincing argument that cow dung would make you wealthier. Because it could make it, with enough of it, you could make a desert a fertile plain.
Yeah.
No one would be hungry. If you had unlimited quantities of gold, you'd just keep spending it, and then everybody would have so much gold it wasn't valued anymore. It was like, whoa.
We hear from some of our friends that the people of super great wealth are very vigorously buying farmland,
Yes.
because farmland appreciates more than securities, more than stocks and bonds and what have you. The land itself always increases in value. Meanwhile, you're able to produce commodities, fruits, vegetables, grains, what have you, from the land. So you're making substantial money on the land today, of course, by sucking out everything you can. And you've got a great investment because you're monopolizing or, consolidating all this land with the prospect of selling it or just continuing to use it to create wealth for yourself. So we hear that the super rich are buying land. We know that in Africa, the Chinese are really buying land right and left for various reasons. Of course, it's Krishna's property, but get the deed to it. Okay. Are there other? No, let us continue then.
We have something in the chat.
Oh, okay, let's see.
Just came in
Tell
from
us.
Praveen Prabhu. Prabhupada talks with renowned person in management. Prabhupada, yes. Rajaji. The people have made an idol of gold and silver, and now letter of paper. Paper meaning the promises of government. Prabhupada, yes. Rajaji, which are never kept. Laughter. Prabhupada, I was going to say it is a fraud. Rajaji, fraud. Prabhupada, Maya. Rajaji, but that is Prabhupada. It is Maya. I give you piece of paper, and you think 1,000 rupees. This is Maya. Rajaji. Yes. You see, it depends on the credit to the man who gives the promise. Paper is mainly the document of credit. Governments have till now kept their credit, but now they have learned to disregard their promises also. Prabhupada, yes.
Hmm. This is a good topic for devotees who may be expert in these things. I'm just an ordinary person. It was only like 15 years ago or so that one of my friends taught me how to write a check and how to deposit it in the bank. It's a brahmachari, I didn't need to do that. So I'm not the person to go deeply, probably more than 15 years, but anyway, not the person to go into these topics deeply, but just as we have devotee scientists who go into the prevailing facts, the prevailing orthodox understanding of science and ask questions in order and seek to present Vedic knowledge concerning scientific topics. So this is a great opportunity for devotees who may be expert in economics, a big topic, economics, and a person who's really familiar with the topic, who's really deep into it, can speak about these things in such a way as to illuminate the wisdom, or to make known the wisdom of the Bhagavatam and of Vedic culture. Science, economics, every field. All of these topics can be, what should we say, on-ramps for understanding something of Vedic culture and the proper organization of society according to varnashram, according to, if you're a graduate, if you know about agriculture, you don't even have to be a graduate of an agricultural college. If you know agriculture, then you know so much more than the ordinary person about that aspect of God's arrangements, Krishna's arrangements. Then you're a qualified person to speak to these things. I had an issue in Ecclesiastes. It involved a metaphor concerning planting and sowing, and I didn't know what to think of it. I had to go to Madhava Ghosh in Vrindavan at the time and say, what's the right way to understand this? Some scholars had said this, and some scholars had said the opposite, and none of those scholars were farmers, so they didn't really weren't really qualified to say. They could just interpret the words according to the grammar. But Madhava Ghosh is a farmer, he said this, yeah, I think it had to do with sowing, watching the wind so that you'd know when to sow. So the question is, do you wait for the wind or do you wait for the not wind? The wind will carry your seeds, is that good? Or the wind will blow away your seeds, is that bad? And, so you have to be a farmer to know. So there's so many topics in Bhagavatam also, which you can take at face value and understand, but if you're an expert in agriculture or biology, some other aspect of science, some other aspect of literature, music, all of these topics can be connected to enhancing our understanding of Krishna consciousness as presented in the Bhagavatam. Yes?
That was really interesting what you just related about Madhava Ghosh and his insight into that passage from Ecclesiastes, because things can escape us just because we're so disconnected from that distant culture and how they lived, which was likely much closer to the earth and to nature than we are.
When I was editing, I should repeat that, I guess, probably people didn't hear it, that you said it was interesting about Madhava Ghosh and how we don't realize how disconnected we are from the land, from culture. And then we have to go to someone who's more connected. I remember when I was editing 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and there's, apart from describing all the different, where the varshas are and all of that, which was a challenge, the dweeps, the varshas. But apart from such recondite topics, there was just a discussion of phases of the moon and all the what was it, the solstices and so on. These things were presented in 5th canto also. And the first thing I had to do to edit all this stuff was to go to the Encyclopedia Britannica and find out what the moon does. Yeah, not even Farmer's Almanac, which, that assumes you have some decent knowledge to begin with. What is it that happens with the moon? It travels and it goes here and there, and then it wanes and it waxes and takes a certain number of days. And, I had the general idea, but in terms of really knowing, because I never look up there. And if you do, it doesn't matter, because all you'll see is the smog.
Streetlights.
Yeah, streetlights. So we're so much out of touch for that reason also, that it becomes hard to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, just because we're so out of touch with what goes on forget the cosmos, just in the sky. What visibly presents itself. Forget what they say is behind it, what the Bhagavatam says, what the scientists say. What do we see? I don't know. So those who are learned can extract from Srimad Bhagavatam various understandings that may be of interest to us and to others also. Something else? Okay. Well, thank you for that conversation. Yeah.
I had a quick question. It seems like this idea of an expert, say an example of an economist, would be so useful for our community at large, because left to our own devices, literally and figuratively, we try and figure out all these things on our own, and they become very consuming and overwhelming, honestly. So just in terms of self-preservation, if we're trying to become more detached, it's like the only solution is either just being naive or ignorant and not paying attention to it, or having someone knowledgeable of it explain it to you.
Yeah. Of course, I've had in mind economics as a large-scale study, things that what goes on a national level and so on. But then when you get to what they used to teach the girls in middle school, home economics,
Right.
I suppose that's out now, but demeaning. But in practical terms, how do you run a household in a way that makes sense? You're working hard now. Usually both spouses are working hard to get money. And then what do you do with the money when you've got it? And we have one of our participants on this Sangha, Bhagavatam Sangha, was Vamsitari Gopal Prabhu in North Carolina, who's an expert in financial management at a personal level, personal financial management. You know, not corporate financial management. How do you manage your money? And at my request, he gave a very useful seminar on financial management. I think it's called Financial Management for Devotees, on how to manage your money. And it was a super eye-opener for many who attended, because it just presented practically how the ordinary devotee making money at the end of 30 years, 40 years, could be sitting on a large accumulation of capital. So that if he wants to send his kids to college, or he wants to do this or that or the other thing, or he wants to take sannyas and buy a house for his wife, or whatever it is, the capital is there. And it wasn't, you know, by fancy stock picking or any of that kind of, you know, arcane day trading and formulae and stuff like that. It was simple, ordinary principles of what to do with your paycheck. Simple, simple, simple. And so often we find that devotees work for 20 or 30 or 40 years, and all they do is tread water. They have no money. At the end of, you know, when they're 50, 60, 70 still, they have no money. They still have to work just to maintain themselves. And it's because they just never learned these practical methods for dealing with money in a prudent and, well, expert fashion. It doesn't just automatically appear in the mind. Evam parampara praptam. Even that knowledge has to come generally by a descending process. So I always recommend to householders, if they're Hindi speakers, they can look on YouTube for Ananda Vrindavan seminars on this topic. Again, it's financial management for devotees or something of that nature. And same for English speakers from Siddhari Gopal. Very, very enlightening in a practical way. If every householder, they get my recommendation. Invest a little time, and it can make a huge difference in where you stand with your financial position, especially if you're a young householder, because over time, these strategies really can help you. When you're 50 and you're 60 and 70 and you want to adopt these things, you know, may be a little helpful, but you're not going to be able to do what you could have done if you'd started, you know, at the beginning. Also, it involves avoiding things that you could do that screw up your financial position. Like begin your financial life by buying a big house that you have to pay whatever exorbitant interest on, and be always weighted down. Anyway, I don't want to, I'm not qualified to give the seminar, nor is that our purpose today. But householders do take advantage of these seminars. They don't cost you anything, and they're so informative. Even, there was just one simple thing that I learned from, 'cause I watch the seminars, after all, I have to advise households. And I'm picking up an extra $300 a month from the bank every month, just by following one thing that I learned from Bhakti Jayadvaita. So, yeah, I don't work at all. So, yeah, thereabouts. So do tune in and see what's there. Krishna's money. Yes. Would you like some financial advice? No, tell me.
I was recalling that in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he mentioned
Okay, we've gone confidential. Oh, I see, we've come to 8 o'clock.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, let's then have kirtan, and we can take that question afterwards, I guess, because usually we try to stop on time. But I'm intrigued by now, but we're at 8:04. We do try to. Okay, Praveen's intrigued also. Tell us what's your question.
I was just wanted to retract and see how Prabhupada brought in Varnashram in this particular discussion, this particular purport, because I know it was important to him at the end of his sojourn with us, it was 11 years. He seemed to emphasize that in the very end, the
Yeah.
Varnashram aspect.
You're intrigued to see how, or found it impressive how Prabhupada mentioned Varnashram at the end of the purport.
Yes.
The main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of Varnashram Dharma, so that the money is spent only for good causes
Right.
and nothing else.
Right.
Devotees or people who don't know how to manage their money spend it to pay credit card interest, 27% or something like that.
Outrageous, outrageous interest rate.
That's not a good cause.
Because we're seeing now that such a huge percentage of the population of the earth is just chasing after this illusory paper,
Yeah.
and in place of Krishna.
So many people are chasing after these illusory pieces of paper and not getting the real value of life.
Exactly. Missing the whole point of the purpose of life.
Okay. Yes. So this should be seen, ultimately. I'm working, I'm making money, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But what is my ultimate goal of life? That's the final thing. How is this contributing to my real purpose in life? So that was the king's final duty, or ultimate, essential duty. Everyone is properly engaged so that everyone can be promoted to Krishna consciousness. Thank you. Okay, we're now officially 6 minutes over time. And it's time for kirtan. Abhay.
Would you be so kind?
Okay. Just a few minutes? Is that okay if I do play Mridanga?
Yeah, sure. Let me.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy. Is it okay if you play? Wow.
Oh, sure.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paripradikacharya Stotra Sri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kundi Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Tham Ki Jai Navadip Tham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamana Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
There was one phrase that I had heard before living at Gitanagari, but then I heard the second part of it, make hay while the sun shines. The second part is, don't wait for rain. Because if it rains while the hay's out trying to dry, it'll ruin the